can actually change like your ability to cope with emotions. And I can use my own example for that one. Saying fight from can.
Yeah.
It throws me into depression.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I think so.
So, and I want to make sure you don't like the coping skills, and you'll do the mind-body wellness, the communication. That's an obvious one. And again, you know, I think part of it is letting teens know that help is available when they need it.
Right.
And what does that look like? Okay. Good morning. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Let's see any roses on our table, but it's still early. They may be showing up later.
Possibly.
So thank you for joining us this morning. I think we're really intentional about the topic that we chose today, being that it is Valentine's Day, and this is typically a time when there's kind of gifts and a demonstration of love, and be it big or be it small. I think the most my kids are going to get today is a text because they're not around. It's like thinking of you, I love you. But we also wanted to think about what are the non-tangible things that demonstrate that, you know, how we love our children. And a gift that we thought of today was the idea of really being intentional about teaching our kids about mental wellness, because that is something that will impact their entire life. And I think starting, if we have the ability, if you have young children, excuse me, to start thinking about what does that mean? What does that look like? How, as a parent, do I start to model some of these things and have conversations with my children around this topic? And if not, teenagers are definitely a time where they need to have those skills for mental wellness as they're coping with a lot of the tough issues that they face on a daily basis, and then to have that going into young adulthood. So it's never too late. I think there's some really specific things that we can do as parents to really kind of help promote those ideas. And Susie's going to tell us a lot about that. But I think when I think about it, we spend so much time with our kids on topics of talking about money. It's important. We talk about communication, relationships, sex, physical wellness. And we need to make sure that we start incorporating mental wellness into those conversations. It needs to be something that we're talking with our kids about at the dinner table, you know, in the cars, on the fly. It just needs to be one of those everyday conversations. And then it also needs to tie to, kids need to understand that mental illness is real. It happens throughout our lives as things ebb and flow, that sometimes some of that stress and anxiety does kind of push a little bit far where it's a little more serious. And we need to start working on how do we take the stigma away from that. So I think part of that will come from, if we're dealing with mental wellness, kids get used to talking about their feelings and their emotions, and then understanding when things are starting to get a little bit too tough, how do they reach out for help? So I brought in our expert. So today, Susan Delia, who usually sits behind the computers and is running the show for us as the millennial that understands all the buttons and like how to bring things up. So we have pulled her out. We've stuck our executive director behind, so I hope you're not seeing things smoking or breaking back there. But Susie really can talk to the topic of how do we engage kids along the issues of mental wellness, so that it's something that they can understand, they can start practicing, and how do we not sound preachy about it, but that we just make it, you know, a part of what our family life looks like. And Susan's got lots of her own personal experience. She's been working with kids for an extended period of time. She understands the language. For me, unfortunately, it's been kind of late because my kids were older, but when I have talked about how I presented issues to them, and she would kind of look at me and go, oh yeah, you know what that sounds like? And then she would like tell it back to me. I'd be like, okay, yeah, strike, that one didn't work. So it's a great asset to have someone here that really helps us understand how do we approach kids? How do we, when we have something we want them to hear, and when do we need to just like zip it and just be there to support kids and walk alongside of our kids. So yeah, she's a huge contributor to our team. And so with that, two other things, let me jump back real quick. So we will be doing polls towards the end of the webinar. And I can't stress the importance of the information that you all provide to us in the polls. So please, when they pop up, just give us your quick response back. I think, you know, a lot of times it's just picking one of the answers. Email us if there's things that you would like to see, because we are always open to getting new topics and new ideas of what parents would like, what would be beneficial to parents. So please participate in those polls. They also help a lot in terms of contract and funding and being able to demonstrate that we are providing information and a service that's valuable to you all. There's also a section for questions and answers. So we would love to have those. We would like to have Susie, be able to address anything that is apparent. If you've got questions about, how do I discuss this with my kids or whatever it is along that realm. So just please use both of those tools there. This also will be archived. You can find it on our YouTube Idaho Federation webpage. So if you want to share it with somebody else, or if you just need to go back and review it again, know that we have archived the past couple of years of webinars. So there's a lot of topics that are really valuable there. So with that, then I'm going to turn over to Susan and say again, thanks. I love having you here. And I'm just going to kind of let you talk, but then I'm going to throw in some questions and some things that that I think are really important. So take it away.
Yeah. So just a little bit of the perspective that I bring. My main position is to give youth a voice so that they can start building a healthy and strong communication with their parents and with other trusted adults in their life. And so the stuff that I'm bringing are things that have come up within groups or sessions that we've had, as well as just going out and doing focus groups and the research behind it. So I really feel it's really important to understand that in our society, we're really focused on our physical wellness. And as Carol was saying, we kind of take away from the mental wellness because physical can do a lot of good things, release endorphins and, make it so you're a healthy weight, and which helps with all of that. But the part we're missing is that if we do not have mental wellness and we have times of either developing or continuing to have mental illness, it can really affect our physical as well. And what we're finding is that those who have adverse childhood experiences, we're seeing a higher level of cholesterol issues, high blood pressure, heart disease, as well as diabetes and other things that come into it. And so we really want to take a wholesome approach because the physical and the mental really play into each other on many different levels. And so I kind of wanted to come today and discuss 4 areas in which I would like to focus on. And please ask questions. We're going to try to give some tools, and but if you're saying something and you're not really sure if that's going to work or not, we really would like to hear your feedback so that we can respond live and to you. So first, I would like to kind of start off on, we're going to go from top to bottom. When it comes to youth and their brain development, one thing that we know is that from an early age, the most important thing that they're looking to model are parents. And so when we go through here, we're going to talk about a lot of ways that you within your own life, in your own personal self, can start showing examples that can help your child learn how to have that well-being. And the first one we're going to discuss are thoughts. So the thoughts that we have really change the perception that we view the world. And as a youth gets older and as they become more adolescent, their thoughts become more of an emotional perception of what's happening around them. So very much like, my boyfriend broke up with me. The world is ending. No one will ever love me because now I have no boyfriend. And it's looking at them saying, how did that thought process go from, I have no boyfriend, he left me, I will never be loved, and the world is ending. And so one of the first things is we have to challenge thoughts. But we can't challenge our child's thoughts without first reflecting back and saying, what are the thoughts, what are the perceptions that I have, and what am I saying out loud that my child is picking up on? A good example is when you are under stress, what are you saying? Is it, I can't handle this. This is too stressful. I don't want to deal with this. What are some others? Like,
the one that I think of often that really I think impacts our kids is, and this is very much a female mother thing, is, what do you say about your own, like your body image? What are you projecting? What are your thoughts about how you look and being adequate and being good enough? And how does that sound to your child? And what are they picking up in terms of how you just perceive yourself?
Yeah, and we actually did a webinar on that, and we had a youth come on and discuss that and that perception of what she was hearing. But that's a perfect one, saying I'm fat, and
or I look terrible,
or look at this, look at how this makes my legs look, or my hair, like I can never get my hair to work. And we say these things about ourselves and without any thought, and then we look at our child and we say, you are the most beautiful child in the world. You are gorgeous, you are great, you are wonderful. And the disconnect, I would say on that one, is that your child is looking to you as their number one, and they see you as beautiful, as the best person in the world, that you're gorgeous, and wanting to live up to that. And yet when parents are sitting here saying, I'm fat, it's that disconnect. How can I be beautiful if my mom doesn't see herself as beautiful? How can she see me as beautiful? I look like her. And so it's a really big disconnect. And so looking at how can I challenge those thoughts, and how can I start modeling to my child and saying, like, yeah, I might feel a little bloated today, but I'm really rocking these jeans.
So how do you walk with a child through that process of, they've been at school, they've had a fight with other kids, and all of a sudden it's like nobody likes them, and that they're unlovable, or they have no friends. How do you walk with a kid through that process without telling them they're wrong, that doesn't, that's not accurate? So what does that look like?
And that's a really good one, because I'm going to put this back down. So when your child comes to you and says, I have no friends, no one's ever going to be my friend again, the one thing that we have to make sure doesn't happen is jumping in and saying, everybody loves you. That's not true. I mean, you're going to find friends, because what we have said is what they have said about themselves. Their thought that they believe is wrong, even if we know it's true. Like, you will make friends, you will get through this. But in that moment, when they're saying, I will never have friends again, they're saying that that's the belief that they are holding, and they need that validation. And so we have to be really careful. Same thing, the girl says, I'm just so fat, no one is ever going to love me. We don't want to sit there and go, you are so thin, what are you talking about? That's not true. Because in that moment, even if tomorrow's different, in that moment, they're holding that belief and that thought. And so looking and saying, you know what happened today? Tell me what happened.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on? Can we talk about that? And so not jumping in and just overriding the child, but then saying, I am hearing you say that you're never going to make any friends and you have no friends. Can you tell me about that? And what that does is it validates that you heard the belief, that the thought the child had. And then you're opening the door to say, tell me more of why you believe this.
So kind of walking through them. Because one of the things I think a lot with, I think younger kids having that issue, I think of like with the teens and social media, and how often I know with my daughter and looking at what was happening in social media and feeling like she was being left out, or that, she didn't look beautiful, or she didn't have all the cool clothes, or she wasn't hanging out with the right people, or wasn't going to the right places, and the pressure that social media has, and again, how that starts to really weigh in their mind. A lot of self-doubt, a lot of self-criticism, a lot of social anxiety that's being pushed. I think it's one of the things I see a lot in the adolescent world, and that sense of because it's so unreal. I mean, that's what we know is that, social media is just like giving us a sliver of what somebody wants to see. And it's an image that's not real. So how do you combat that with the kids to say that, to get them to understand that what they're seeing on social media is not the real world of anybody's life, be it the Kardashians or the girl down the street.
And there might be a little bit difference between girls and boys. Girls, when it comes to problems, they need to talk it out and really stretch it out and process it. And so in some ways it's almost easier, and yet it can be very difficult because reinforcing when they're looking at social media. I can say it's really hard. It's really hard to go through Instagram and to see pictures where, they're using filters. That they have their camera up and it makes you thinner, and that they're putting oil on their muscles so that it, they glisten. And the fact of the matter, yes, they glisten. And then you go into the mirror and you're seeing, I'm breaking out, my hair's, dull, the muscles are not there. And so it can be really difficult. But it's looking at it, and again, it's, we get into the habit of saying, well, those girls aren't real. Like, that's not reality. They're not, they feel just as uncomfortable as you. And we usually end up stating that at the very beginning versus doing it later on after the discussion is going forth with your child. So saying, so you're seeing all these pictures and you're feeling really bad about yourself as you're going through them. Can we talk about that?
Well, do you think in that conversation you can get the kids to come up with the same conclusion that we already know, that this is not real? That if they talk through that whole topic about, how pictures are taken or like how often this happens, that they can eventually come up to the point and go, yeah, I know that this really, their life is not as great as it looks on social media, and social media is really distorting how we view ourselves. Can they come to that realization? Do they know that? And do they understand how it's impacting them? Because as we're talking about thoughts and mental wellness, are they making those connections?
Well, and it's something that is discussed a lot. And so they have seen it. They know that is what people say.
Right.
And even if they logically can get to that conclusion on their own, the more
there's the head and the heart.
Yeah, it's the head and the heart.
They hit it here, but it still hurts.
Which is our second one, talking about emotion.
Okay.
But the important thought is that we're talking about thought process. And if you don't know how your child has come to a thought, then it's really hard to challenge that thought. So you might go through and talk about social media, and they might go through the whole thing, and at the end, you're sitting there and you're like, my child has no idea that this is not real.
Yeah.
But then you understand that. You have an idea of their thought process, and now you can start looking and seeing, where can I challenge this? And when you hear it later on, like next week, that Tiffany with her super cute locks, you can sit there and say, yeah, so I know that this is where you believe that this looks like, but what if it looked different? What if Tiffany had just gone to the salon? And so you start challenging some of those things, but until you understand their thought process, then it's kind of swimming in the dark. You're not quite sure where you're going or how to challenge that. And
we also forget that with my older son, who really held on to a lot of negative thoughts about himself, even though he had, his teachers and his counselors and his parents and friends' parents, things like that, that were giving him different messages that he would not accept about himself, because he was really holding on to this more negative sense of self. Is kind of like teaching kids about the negative self-talk that they do and how damaging negative self-talk, and that idea of starting to supplant it with some other ideas, and the idea that at first it may not feel comfortable because they may feel like it's really being fake to start saying positive things about themselves. But that idea that it will shift them to a new place eventually if they can start doing it. Because you hear kind of that loop that goes in their head, and the way that they're talking about themselves. And they just seem to repeat. They have certain things. I think for my son, it was that he wasn't smart. He's a child that had really significant learning disabilities, but incredibly bright kid. But he just wasn't going to do well in the classroom. And with that came a lot of anxiety, and then the depression and the anger. And with ADHD, just, he was kind of all over the place. And so for him, there were a lot of negative messages that just continued to go over and over and over in his mind. And it was hard. Even as an adult, I know that he still sometimes gets stuck in that, and needing to be able to change it. So part of it was challenge in being able to be comfortable and letting people that he trusted kind of challenge that in a gentle way and put it out there. And then also being willing to try some new things that he would say to himself when he got into a position where something was hard, or felt like he couldn't do it, or felt like he was failing at something, is to find a new thing that he would say to himself.
And a lot of times, youth really want to be heard. And when you can show you that you heard them, but then they also want to see an example. So when we say we're challenging their negative beliefs or their negative thought process, trying to stop that, that's where we go back and say, are you also challenging your own negative self-talk? And then let's say that is something you struggle with. Then what exercises can you do with your child that they can walk alongside next to you? One would be a very easy one. So negative self-talk about body image. One of the things that I did, and I actually pulled my mom into doing it with me, is writing on every mirror in our bathroom and in our bedrooms affirmations, and not like big, huge ones, but saying just simple like, I am beautiful, I am smart, I am strong. Just things that are like every morning waking up and looking. And that's the first thing that you see. Because negative self-talk it's hard to break, and it takes time. It's not something that'll happen quickly, but it's something you can say, I'm hearing a lot of negative self-talk. And, I struggle with that too. And being honest about that, I struggle with that too. Would you like to do something with me like that? With a boy, you can do it with boys, right? You might not write on their mirror, I'm beautiful, just depending, but you can put there like, I am strong, I am brave, I am handsome, I am good enough. That was a big one.
I'm good enough. Yeah, right.
And that way, they have that positivity starting the day. All the negative stuff might happen. They come home, and there it is again.
So to me, the challenges in today's thing is like, how do we make that gender free? How do we not do the girls, I am beautiful, the boys, I am strong? How do we go to those characteristics of, like you said, that, I am worthy, I'm smart, I am capable, and making sure that we're not doing stereotypes. That's another thing that creates tremendous stress for our kids. Our girls think they're supposed to be beautiful, our boys think they're supposed to be strong, brave, and silent. So really at a young age, starting to put in some of those ideas at their head. So what's the next one you have on your list after?
So looking at emotions. So one of the things that we're really struggling with on the east side is looking at I call it the good emotion, bad emotion. Happy versus angry. And it was actually training we did through the program Nurturing Families, where they really delved into it, and they said, what happens if we didn't have good feelings and bad feelings, but we had comfortable feelings and uncomfortable feelings? Because when we have bad feelings, the connotation of that is like, you get angry, you're a bad person. Like you feel bad. There's a lot of shame that comes with having bad emotions, versus taking a look at it and saying, an emotion is just an emotion. The behavior is the one that we have to work on. If you get angry and throw something, that is an emotion that has a very bad behavior, versus you're angry which is bad, and then you behave badly, so now you're double shamed. So looking at, first off, are emotions good and bad? Or are they just comfortable or uncomfortable? And being really comfortable with discussing with your child, like, I can see you're sad, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
Right.
And versus, well, if you're sad, well, you need to get happy. Like, we don't want you to be sad.
Mm-hmm.
Because
well, I think parents, I think there is a tendency of parents to want to like fix things so that our kids are happy and not let them own emotions and recognize that things do happen. That, you know, if they were at school and kids said mean things to them and they came home sad, as well, you know, let's have a bowl of ice cream and make you happy, or let's watch your favorite TV show and make you happy. So that sense of really owning an emotion, not because they shouldn't feel that way, but allowing them to kind of work their way through something.
Exactly. The one thing we know is parents, you guys love your kids. You want the best for your kids. You want them to have the best chances and the best perspective of themselves. And so when we talk about it, again, and I said it differently, but we need to validate. I can see you're sad and that's okay. So let's have a bowl of ice cream and watch your favorite movie. You know, so it's validating where they're at and saying it's okay that they have felt that way. But now where do we go from there? Like, is it something that you need to just be sad for a little while?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it something that, you know, you just need time with me,
mm-hmm.
or you need time with your friends?
Right. I think it's like the one of the things you talked about the other day was is helping them identify what is the emotion that they're feeling, and then be able to own it, and then asking them what works well for them. What do they need when something has happened to them? Because again, that really empowers the kids from a young age, you know, all the way through their adolescence, to be able to know when I'm feeling this way, these are the things that work for me. So it's developing the coping skills
Mm-hmm.
that are theirs, as opposed to it being fixed. Because I think we do have a tendency to want to fix things as parents. And that just long term does not work for our kids, because they don't really carry it away, or it may not be the thing that really kind of fills that hole for them if we're giving them ice cream and really what they need is to be able to go and put their headphones on and listen to some music. And even if it's, you know, if it's a hard day and they're sad and they listen to sad music and it makes them cry more, is to let them do that if they're identifying that that's what's going to help them move through it.
Right.
Not get stuck in it, but kind of help move through it. And I think that can start at really early age, again, talking with kids about, you know, what can I help you do, or what is it that you need right now?
Yeah, what do you need from me? Or what do you need for yourself? And it's so empowering, because there is a power dynamic. You know, parents are the authoritarians, and not authoritarians in a bad way, but like, you have the power, and you feel very disempowered a lot of times. You know, in school, there's that power differential and all those ways. They never seem to have much power unless they're in their own friend group, right? Their peers. And so to look at a child or an adolescent and be like, tell me what you need. Where are you at? What are some of the things that you see yourself wanting to do or be? It's a huge empowering moment where it's like, I'm not going to take you by the hand and lead you down the road,
right,
and just do what I think is best. Though parents need to do that as well. But say, like, I want to walk next to you and help build you up and help move you forward. And we're going to try a few different things. So tell me some of the things that we can try to make that work.
Yeah. And to reemphasize what you had said from the very first one, I think you maybe said here, is again, I think for parents to be able to model that ability to identify their emotions, own their emotions, not feel like they always, because their parents have to have everything together. I think we do a really good job of masking when we're stressed. And granted, we don't want to like lay everything on the table and let the kids know that, like, you know, we're facing bankruptcy, we're going to leave the house, can't afford to feed the dog. That might be more information than they need. They don't need to know the details. But I think for kids to learn that we do struggle and life is hard for us and it does ebb and flow. And to be able to put names to what those emotions are that we're feeling. If we're stressed, if we're sad, if we're feeling like fabulous, all of that kind of stuff. And again, I think the modeling is where they learn it the most.
Right.
And I feel like we have not done it. I know within my own family, I can speak specifically that we didn't do that well. And I feel like it's a challenge that I have to acknowledge with my kids and let them know this was harder for me. I feel like growing up, I didn't do it as well with you all. So just be aware of it. It's not too late.
And that is the truth. It's never too late. One of the things is, let's say right now that you are somebody who doesn't share feelings, doesn't feel emotions. We're not talking about, like you said, just laying it all on the table, but looking in and saying very easily, I am very stressed right now, which is the emotion. I'm feeling stressed. And then what's the behavior? I'm going to take 10 minutes just in my room to think about where I'm at, and I'll be right back. Mm-hmm. And so you're modeling the emotion and then the behavior that you have, playing football or watching football, dad's sitting there saying, I really want, the Cowboys to win. Cowboys lose horribly. Dad's angry. I am angry. But then he picks up a remote and throws it through the wall. That's the modeling that our youth are seeing. Mm-hmm. And so they understand that when they're angry, it's okay to do that. Versus saying, like, I am angry. You might yell at the TV. Not the greatest, but it's like, what do you want to model that anger as? And really looking at when you're sharing emotions, what are you then doing in a behavioral way that is showing your youth, when I am stressed, I drink. When I am stressed, I go for a run. When I am stressed, I avoid everyone for 3 weeks. So really kind of taking a look at that and then discussing it with your child and being like, when I am really stressed out, here are the things that I have to do. Mm-hmm. And you're showing them step by step how they can then look and say, when I'm stressed, I can try that as well.
Right. I think what's hard for kids also, if they don't understand, if parents aren't identifying it for them, they certainly feel like you can't hide from your kid. If some of those, not negative, those uncomfortable emotions that you're talking about, they know when we're stressed, they know when we're angry. But if we're not like telling them that, a lot of times they're internalizing it, that they've done something wrong. And then they're trying to negotiate around us to how do they make us feel better, or how do they stay out of our way. So the importance of being able to identify it, put it on the table, process it, for kids to be able to see that we are working our way through, again, not needing to know the details of what it is a significant learning opportunity. But I feel bad for so many kids that are in situations where they internalize their parents' emotions because parents aren't letting them know. So again, that whole idea of modeling is we're not saving much from our kids by thinking we're hiding things. They're just, we're much more transparent than that. And the kids then come up to their own conclusions, often blaming themselves for that.
Well, and as they move closer into the adolescent stage, the part of the brain that is the emotions really take a big control, where our front of our brain is the executive. It's our logical part and tells us like, stop, don't rush, think about it, right? So our adolescents are living in the emotional area, which means that they're a lot more sensitive. They can pick up on emotions a lot quicker and easier. And so not only internalizing that it might have been them, but also causing confusion, like, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But mom's in a rage, but she's keeping it together. I don't know. And it's confusing. And so they start trying to make sense of it. And what you don't want is for them to make sense of it in the wrong way, where all of a sudden
they start stuffing it so that they know there's something on, but you're stuffing it, because then that's how they learn to deal with emotions.
Because that's the right way to handle it, because then it doesn't cause problems for everybody. When it's something where you can say, you know what, I am very angry and I don't really want to discuss it right now because I need to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives them more of a stance to be like, okay, she's angry, she's going to think about it, and then she'll get back to me. It's more of a map for our youth on what that might look like.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's a lot of, and I think at one point I will loop back to these in terms of like, what are the coping strategies and helping kids to develop strategies of how to deal with their emotions. I know music was really important for my daughter. Mm-hmm. Drawing was really important for my daughter. I think for the boys, they were much more active and they needed to like kind of burn off some of that energy as they were dealing with a range of emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to, and again, these are things that you can do with your child to, again, model and to find strategies that work when it comes to coping. So at an early age, I was a handful. My younger brother was a handful. My older brother, he was just so much older that, he was doing his own thing. And we would spend an hour every night with all the lights out, candles on the table, sitting there and just breathing, which would have been horrible. And especially for someone with ADHD, that's not usually an easy thing, but we did it every night, and it became one of the only times that I actually felt real peace. Mm-hmm. When my brain wasn't everywhere, or,
Right. That was obviously a family strategy.
It was a family strategy because she needed to have that moment of silence, right. I think, more than we did.
Something that she got pass on to you all. Okay, how about the next one? How about in regards to, I have body reaction. What do you have?
Yeah, so physical. So now we're going to kind of go into the importance of physical when it comes to our well-being. And when we have emotions, and Carol stated this, we, growing up, you have no idea what emotions they're feeling. And it seems very simplistic when we're really young. And then as we hit adolescence and things start exploding in our brain and we're just living in turmoil all the time, it can be really, really difficult because we have new vocabulary, new ways of feeling, not understanding what that looks like. And so by working on identifying the emotions, we could also then start talking about the physical reactions to some of that. So if a child is feeling really scared, but they're acting out in anger, really talking about that. Well, are you scared? Or, how is that looking for you? And then saying, like, what are you feeling? Like, is your heart racing? Are your palms sweaty? And so start helping them realize, like, what are some of their body reactions?
So that mind-body connection.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so they'll start being able to identify. So when their heart starts racing, they'll be like, you know what? I could be really excited, but I am pretty sure I'm not really excited. Pretty sure this is more of a heart pumping, I'm scared right now.
Terror. Well, I think of the stomach ache. That's what I remember a lot at home, was that and it was true. I mean, there was definitely a stomach ache, but the stomach ache was a result of the anxiety about going to school, with feeling like incapable of doing work and some of the social issues that went with it, and the headaches. So, I mean, stomach aches and headaches were a lot of what I remember, both, elementary, junior high, and definitely the headaches into high school dealt with kind of that stress of all what the emotions were, and having to really work hard to be able to like pull away what those layers are that could possibly be making that connection between the two.
Yeah. When we feel anxiety, there's a chemical that's released in our brain that floods us with flight or fight. And if we're continuously being doused with this and not understanding that because we're feeling anxiety, this is what it looks like, it makes it really hard for us to then use our frontal lobe to take a step back and say, okay, so just got a dump full. I feel like I need to hit the road as fast as I can. I know because my palms are sweating, my heart is beating, my face is red. Okay, what do I need to do? And then not only are you having a physical reaction, but then you can use physical things to start coping, so like the ball that you squeeze, or, You know,
Right.
the pen, I always keep a pen because I get nervous and I have to play with it. It's saying I'm really angry and I have all that energy, and so I need to go for a run. And so looking at strategies to not only identify physically what's happening, but then what can we do physically to release that energy?
Mm-hmm.
Running, horseback riding, walking around the block with our dog. And so talking to our youth, it's like, here are some coping strategies that we're going to try, and we'll see what you like and what works for you.
Right.
Right.
I found like when it was the more uncomfortable emotions, I mean, there was much more of a desire just to go into bed, pull the covers over their head, and just have that physical headache, stomach ache, body ache, or whatever. And it was harder not wanting to look at whatever the emotion was that was connecting it together.
Right.
Because there was that sense of avoidance of, something blew up at school, be it friends, boys, grades, with not doing as well as they wanted to, just with that sense of not making it, like they're not as capable as they want to be, but at the same time not wanting to make that connection.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to physically feel sick until I feel better. And the more that I could push to be able to get them to make a connection, what are they feeling that's causing them to physically feel this way, and then to create a strategy to how do I cope with that so that I can get back on the road sooner than later. So it's kind of like helping them connect the dots, because sometimes they may not want to.
Right. And it gives them time. So for me, a big coping strategy when I'm angry or scared or even happy is running.
Mm-hmm.
And running, it releases endorphins within my brain. So if I'm feeling sad or depressed or anxious, it's releasing endorphins to help kind of work through that. But it also gives me a moment of just doing something on my own, releasing any energy that's not good for me, and introducing, endorphins that are good for me. And it's so when you're done with it, you're feeling happier, you're feeling better, you're feeling more in control. You finish something, whether it's just walking around the block or however that looks, and you can then move into a more positive, okay, where do I need to go from here?
Mm-hmm.
And so it does make it easier to just be like, I'm feeling something, I'm not quite sure I want to handle it right now, so I'm going to go for a run. And during the run, it gets lifted, and it's like, yeah,
the world's not going to end.
Tomorrow, I'll get it.
I may not have that boyfriend anymore. I may not have that girlfriend anymore, but the world's not going to end anymore.
Right. And that's very simplistic.
Mm-hmm. But it's clarity. I think it provides like a little more clarity where everything gets so jumbled in their head, and they do get a kind of distorted perspective sometimes with the emotions that they're feeling. Right. So to be able to do that physical sometimes kind of takes away some of that fog, and they can see things a little better, create a plan a little bit better for the next time.
And that's why we say when we separate mental and physical, we're doing a lot of harm versus doing more holistic. And the best example is if you have a child who's a superstar at football or soccer or basketball, and you're like, well, they are physically fit. Our girl in volleyball, basketball, and physically fit, looks great, doing good, has friends. But if they don't have that mental well-being within that, you're going to have a child whose girlfriend or boyfriend breaks up with them. And not only are they devastated, but then they don't know how to cope. And then it starts showing in their physical abilities. It gets harder on their mental well-being, and it causes a longer issue versus someone who has a holistic view of who they are and what they do, and physical and mental, and are devastated with the breakup, but then can cope and work through it. And so that's like the best way. We can't separate the physical and the mental. One of the things about mental well-being that is really associated with sleep, we cannot cope with things if we do not sleep.
Oh, that's a tough one for adolescents.
Yes. It's super hard. It's still hard. you know, and with someone who has mental illness, sleep does not come easy. And for some, they just drop like a rock, and that's great. But if they are not getting enough sleep, then it is so hard to then.
I mean, it's easy to say, but how? So how do you encourage kids, teens, or whatever to really be getting their sleep? I mean, the first thing I think of is I know in my household, because we were right on that cusp of when social media was getting really big, and there were phones in the bedroom. So that was a challenge, and I know it impacted their sleep. So I think we're getting ready to do one of the polling questions. So please just notice as it pops up, if you could just answer it, that'd be great. If you could send us that information. So I know that's the first area I go to. I would have done it completely differently. I'm not exactly sure what I would have done. Probably starting really early with kids to develop a habit that phones stayed out of the bedroom.
Right.
Were turned off at certain periods of time. It's a double-edged sword. There's a lot that's good that can occur with your phone. And to me, it's like if you're going to lose that battle, then there are, particularly with older kids that need to learn to start self-monitoring themselves. There are some really good apps for like sleep that they could use. But again, I think if you can get some of those electronics out of the phone would be one way to help with sleep. And then
if you have a child who does not have a cell phone yet and they get a cell phone, you know, really think about keeping that electronic stuff, even Apple Watches or Fitbits or anything like that, keeping it out of the room. Now, if your child has it in their room, it would be incredibly difficult to get it out of the room, and that might not be a battle that you really want to face, you know, because we have a lot of battles, and you kind of have to choose where you want to be with that. And so there's some things that you can do. So for me, I have a lot with ADHD, my mind doesn't shut off. And I struggle with making sure I can sleep because my mind is continuously thinking. And so I actually use, there's 2 apps that I use. And on our website, we're actually going to list some of the apps and some of the resources for parents talking to the teens about this. But I use a white noise app. And that the just constant noise and buzzing actually really helps my mind calm down. I don't know why, but it works. If that doesn't work, I also listen to meditation app where they actually do like yoga breathing and some other things, and the person has a deep voice and it's very soothing for whatever reason, and I'll listen to that until I fall asleep. So if your child is struggling with sleeping, if they're using their phones and things like that, that is one thing you can say is, you know, phones need to be off, and here's a couple apps that we can start using to see if it helps with your sleep.
Yeah.
And know that it's not going to be the first night you're listening to white noise and your child's going to sleep. It might take a little while for them to get used to it, and then for their brain to start reacting to it.
Yeah. So when I think of like sleep being key, being physically active in some way, and again, the spectrum in terms of what kids like to do is huge. We have some that are uber athletes and they're off all the time. Others who are a little less comfortable and a little less active, but they still need to be doing something and really working. And that's, I think, again, another really good modeling to be out there, either doing it with your kids or demonstrating that you're out there taking care of yourself. So hopefully that they will kind of slide into their own way of finding something to be physically active. Being outside, I mean, there's a lot of research these days that talk about being in nature, even if it is just those quiet walks through a park, if you have access to mountains and trails, close to a river, or if it's just sitting and listening to the birds and watching the clouds, or like for little kids laying on their back watching clouds and making, you know, little animals out of them. And then nutrition is another one that we continue to talk to kids a lot about. And that's a really tough one because there's just like so much what they consider yummy food that has like 0 nutritional value. So how do you really start having those conversations and getting kids to own it? And in my family, it was a shift. I mean, they slowly, I think when they started cooking for themselves some at home, and particularly if I just like kept a lot of things out of the house that were junky and their choices were limited, they started to learn to make their own food. And then I think they started making better choices. But wow, that's just such an important one because the amount of junk that kids can put into their body is enormous.
And there are times when, you don't know what your child is eating. They go to a friend's house, they are at school, they're, people bring lunch bags. I remember in high school, I wouldn't get lunch, and I had friends who brought me lunch. And so I was eating pudding and stuff that I shouldn't have been eating because of the reaction that I had with it. And so nutrition is really important. And some of that is starting to cook with your child. The earlier the better.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Just
letting them make some choices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As far as here are the options we have for dinner. For each one would you prefer? Would you like to help me? So it teaches them some cooking skills, makes them feel empowered because they chose the food they were going to eat. And then as they get older, the more you make it into a routine, the easier it is for your child to stick to it.
Right. And one of the really typical things, and again, like research shows a lot of this, and we as in a community have been talking about this for a long time, is that so if you're cooking, having a child join you, the cooking, and then sitting down as a family, eating dinner together, because communication and being open to your kids is one of these key things with wellness, because this is when you have that opportunity to really be able to check in with them, find out how they're doing, talk about what are some of the strategies that they may use to, for mental wellness, and then just making sure you're keeping those lines of communication open in between driving with your child in the car, and like maybe turning the radio down and like letting the kids start the conversation there. That one notoriously always seems to be a great place because kids don't have to have that eye contact that makes them so nervous. Or the dinner table tend to be the places where conversation happens the most. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to get off track with that because you can sit in front of the TV or, conversations can kind of wander into areas. You can be really intentional to try to take part of that time and just set it aside to do those check-ins. And then let that become part of a family habit.
Right. It's one of the things that now I'm outside of my family's home and living my life. It's one of the things I miss because to me, dinner time was the time that I could share my day, not share my day, hear what my family was up to. And it's a really huge bonding moment. And in today's society, with all the distraction we have, it's something that I don't see as often, but is really, really important
to carve that out. And it's also really key to let kids know, and maybe I said this in the beginning, is that, that everyone needs to be practicing mental wellness. I mean, no matter what your age is. And again, there's that ebb and flow, is that there are things that are always going to be coming up in our life that can be challenging, and we're going to have emotional responses to things. And sometimes, we get overwhelmed by them, and we do need to go outside and seek additional help. And, excuse me, and what does that look like? So, how would a kid access additional help? There's a lot of cool apps that, again, kids can use, some online, but you may want to be the parent that lets them know what that looks like. And having those conversations with your children when things aren't going on is the key, so that they know what their resources are, so that when things do happen, they've got resources they can fall back on. But it only comes through conversation.
Right. And as far as, that, because there's something I read recently that was really neat. Born This Way Foundation, they did a digital community survey, and they surveyed 4,000 to maybe a little bit more than that of parents and youth, and asked about, support online and things like that. And what they were kind of pulling together was that youth go online to find support, and they're having positive interactions and finding positive relationships, and more so than parents are realizing. They also show that youth who are online, they struggle with understanding the negativity and the credibility of what they're seeing, but they are not having problems with understanding the information. And so as your child's online and they're going through stuff, they're understanding what's being said and they understand the information, but the negativity and the credibility of what's being said is where they struggle. Again, those emotional thoughts that you as a parent can move through. Also showing that a child is more willing to talk to their parent about harassment online if a parent is watching videos online with their child, so YouTube and things like that, and that can be really hard. My brother watches things that make no sense and are kind of stupid. And there are times when my mom sees it and she's just like, why? Why would you? That's stupid. But taking that time and being like, you know what? This is what my child likes. I don't know why they like it. I don't understand it.
Right, but to be with them and to be able to have a conversation about them, it just builds the relationship so that they will be more likely to approach you when they need to.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, I have like 5 takeaways in terms of helping kids with mental wellness. And one of them is that idea we really need to help our kids teach coping skills. And again, they may have to practice some that don't work for them and look for what they are. There's, definitely there's a lot out there for the meditation, the mindfulness I think is huge. That's been talked about so much probably just in the last 5 years or so, and recognizing the value both as a parent and teaching that to our kids. So helping our kids really look at what is it they need, helping them to identify that. It changes through time, but I think they need to have strategies. And if it means writing them down, coming up with ideas, I think a lot of times our role as a parent is not to fix things, but to be able to put things in front of our kids.
Yes.
What's an opportunity that may be one that works for them? So for some kids, when I'm not an artsy person, but recognizing that I did have a kid that really did well with drawing, and that was something that was a go-to for them. For another one, it was definitely that idea of music. So being able to make sure that they have access to things that work for them, with the idea that it's helping them work through something and not just get stuck in it. So helping them develop what their own personal coping style and strategies are. And then educating, we talked about this, about both mental wellness and mental illness, and the kind of where that intersection is sometimes, and helping to destigmatize that. And I think as a culture overall, we recognize it, but it's very slowly shifting, and that it's okay. There's not that something was wrong with a kid. If their issues become more significant, they need to reach out for help.
Right.
Going to a counselor is more about developing some tools and dealing with some issues as opposed to they're broken, and helping them kind of work through that issue, but really understanding, what mental wellness and integrating that into our conversations with our kids from a very early age. And then again, that whole mind-body connection, that's just like so big that kids really need to understand that from an early age. That, sometimes that stomach ache, sometimes that headache is about what's going on with their emotions, and they've got to connect the dots. If they want to be able to, take control and be in charge and be empowered to move forward in life and not be kind of held back by kind of the physical ailments. And then communication, and all things in life with our kids, to be able to communicate really openly with them so they know that we are a resource to them. Absolutely. And I think it goes back to what you were saying as far as not jumping in there, telling them they're wrong, telling them how to fix it, telling them how it should have been done, but to be able to walk alongside of them and really validate what the kids are saying. And that really means zipping it sometimes, because man, if my kids had just listened to me, I could have planned their life out for them and it would have been perfect. But yeah, go ahead. They didn't want to listen to me.
Yeah.
So just like having to be silent sometimes and just acknowledge them. Even though we may see things differently, but take that winding road with them, I think is so key. And then they will come back to us when they need us to be able to ask those questions. And then finally, to me, is to let the kids know that help is available. That, as parents, that we have a limit to what we're capable of doing, or that what they want to bring to us.
Right.
So what are those resources, and making sure they have those resources, they know what they are, and how they can reach them.
Right. Absolutely.
We have a quick question.
Ooh, Ruth says we have a question.
We're going to just do one question. That's all we have time for. How do parents respond to a youth who says, I don't know what I need? Any quick thoughts on that?
I mean, when it comes down to it, that's a huge statement for a child to say, I don't know what I need. And to sit there and say, you know what, that's okay. So that's when you can step in as a parent and say, why don't we think about a few things that we could do and see if any of it clicks with you?
Try some of it.
Yeah, try some of it. Is this something that if they're saying, I don't know what I need, and they're having like explosions or very, high ups and downs, it might be like, would you be willing or open to seeing someone about that?
Mhm.
Who do you trust that you could talk to? What would that look like? But being able to, like Carol say, you can put stuff down in front of your youth and say, are any of these things that you think would help at this moment? And then we can discuss it onwards.
Yeah, so I think and part of it is like assessing, like, are we talking about something really big that you might have that conversation of, are you willing to go see someone else? Or is it just like something smaller of like, hey, let's just take a walk. Do you need to be able to get outside, decompress a little bit? So part of it is assessing kind of where the child is at and how big of a response needs to be, and then provide a couple different options and offer to be with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that's kind of vague, so yeah.
Yeah.
Any other things that we wanted to throw in as we finish up?
Yeah, so so just so you know, if you did ask questions, we will answer them and get a hold of you and let you know what our response would be for them. We also kind of want to open up and just let you know that, we are here to try to, help give voice not only to youth, but to parents and to empower them. And so we're kind of excited. We have a new segment that we're going to start. So we do our monthly webinar for parents, but Carol has agreed to a new project where we will be going on Facebook Live once a week. And it's going to be, 5 minutes to 20 minutes, just depending on the topic, and just really kind of discussing topics in our state and what's happening around that would impact parents' lives, and asking for stories and information from our parents to kind of
share information.
So it's going to be, the segment is called Carol's Coffee Break, because she will be drinking coffee. And so please go to our Facebook page, Idaho Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Like our page. You can ask to be notified when we go live, but you can also go and just review any of the ones that you might have missed. And we really appreciate everyone being here and just paying attention. So.
Yeah. Good luck. Enjoy your Valentine's Day. And remember, like, mental wellness is a gift that you can give your kid in terms of teaching those skills all their life, and it will benefit them long past the days that they have moved on out. So take care. Have a good day. Love to all.